Hello, hello. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm Sarah Bueno, your host. How are you? I'll wait for your answer. Oh, good. You're good. For those of you who said you're doing well, and for those of you who are not, I hope this conversation brightens your day. Today, I am speaking with Janet Boyer, and I think I tell you in the episode why I reached out to her, so I'm not going to tell you that right now, but I'll read you her bio. How about that? So Janet Boyer is the author of Back in Time Tarot, Tarot in Reverse, and Naked Tarot, Sassy Stripped Down Advice, as well as the co-creator of the Snowland Deck and Coffee Tarot. A former radio host, she's been a guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, Jim Harold's Paranormal Podcast, and other metaphysical shows, as well as this one now. She invites you to visit her online at janetboyer.com, as well as the Shea Boyer Etsy shop, where she, her husband, and their son offer original art, inspired jewelry, hand-sewn tarot bags, and more. So I wanted to start this episode by reading a little bit from Naked Tarot. So those of you who've been listening for a while know that I'm a big fan of tarot, and I pull a card every day. And today I just asked the general, what do I need to know about my life today? And I pulled the Two of Coins or Pentacles. They can be called either. And I'm going to read you the opening of what it says for the Two of Coins in Janet's book here, because it's very indicative of why I wanted to have a conversation with her. So, stripped down overview of the Two of Coins. Have you ever bent over backwards for someone only to get it up the ass with no lubricant? Juggling day-to-day activities, you try to please everyone, but it just ain't happening. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, allocating a lump of money for rent while cobwebs form in your pantry, enduring a busted head gasket while carpooling. It's enough to make a grown woman cry. But what choice do you have? Either you pick up the pieces of broken dishes, vacuum the cat litter that Whiskers kicked 3 feet from the box, run lunch money to little Lucinda, or lay down and give up. You've come too far for that, though, right? Simplify if you can, delegate if you must, but create a pocket of downtime in your overbooked schedule to catch your breath, because the neighbor kid is about to throw a baseball through your already cracked window. I love that example. And this book is full of just really great ideas about what the different tarot cards mean. And she is a wealth of information. In our interview, I really could have kept listening, and we actually spoke for quite a long time after I stopped the recordings. She reminds me of my therapist in all of the information that's just housed in her head, and it's just so incredible. So I truly hope that you enjoy this interview with Janet Boyer. Hi, Janet. Welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. I'm always nervous to send to people if I've read their books. There's just something you're a super famous person just because you have a book out, and there's always this fear of why would anyone want to talk to me? So I appreciate when people accept.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm just a normal person who wrote books, and it's not, I was just telling my high school friend the other day, I saw him at a Subway, my family and I, and we were playing catch-up. We went to high school together, and he goes, yeah, I see you have another book out. And I'm like, yeah. I said, almost killed me. And I said, people think being a writer is so glamorous. And I said, on so many levels, it just sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, but it's just, especially when you write for niche,
Yeah.
I write tarot books, which is very niche because you got nonfiction, mind, body, spirit, and then you got divination, tarot. So you're niche, and none of us are getting rich off of it, or most of us, aren't of that kind of thing. And so it's almost like a calling to write that kind of book, especially a nonfiction that you write specifically because you want to help heal people or encourage them or get them to raise their consciousness. And so I was actually intimidated when I saw your credentials, and I'm like, why would you want to speak with me? I was thinking the same thing. I know, isn't that hilarious? Because I have so much respect for social workers and counselors and things like that, because when I was in college, I was diagnosed with major depression and went through therapy, and I minored in psychology. So when I saw your credentials, I'm thinking, why in the world would you want to talk with me?
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that funny? But must be like Mutual Admiration Society at a distance.
Oh, wow. It's so funny that the podcast ends up being that every time. My editor makes fun of me because usually we have good conversations and then at the end we're like, oh my God, I love you. I love you too. Oh my God, I love you. And she's like, I'm going to just make a fucking compilation of the love fests that happen on your show. I'm like, please.
We're already at it and we haven't even started.
I know. So, okay, let's rewind because I do want to talk about Naked Tarot. I want to talk about all the things. But would you first tell people who you are and what you do?
Oh, wow.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Okay, my gosh. Deer in headlights. No, my name is Janet Boyer, and I am from southwestern Pennsylvania. I've been married it'll be 22 years this year. We have an almost 21-year-old son. My first book came out in 2008, Back in Time Tarot. 2012 was Tarot in Reverse, a book dedicated to reversals. And then last fall, Naked Tarot came out, which is sassy stripped-down advice, and it's my largest, most in-depth, intense book ever. And I'm also the co-creator of the Snowland deck and the Coffee Tarot. My husband did the art for it. He did the art apart from his full-time job. And so before that, I majored in pastoral ministry and theology at college, and I used to be a Pentecostal pastor. With my first husband, I majored in theology and then had a double minor in English and psychology. And we pastored for a while, and then he started feeling weird and things, and we thought it was the flu. Here he ended up having leukemia, and within a year he was dead. And then for a year I was a widow. Then I met my present husband. He was one of my students actually at church in young adult class. And we just knew within like a week of meeting one another. We became fast friends, bonded over his art, and we were married within 6 weeks. And so here we are celebrating. Will be our 22nd anniversary. So that's kind of, in a nutshell. I was called to tarot. I had a prophetic inkling and that gift, as they called it in the Pentecostal circles. But I ended up leaving traditional Christianity, first of all, because I realized that despite the Assemblies of God saying they ordained and welcomed women, once my husband died, I realized I was only getting appointments because I was married to a minister. I thought I was getting assignments based on my credentials and my own abilities and gifts. And so it was just battering my head against the wall trying to be a female minister. And then at the same time, I discovered some writings. I started doing research, and then I realized that the early church didn't teach a literal hell. And so that, totally, would have made me a heretic. And so there was tons of life changes. But I still think about and apply some of the principles of mystical Christianity and the things that are perennial wisdom. But I totally left the church, and I just felt a call to tarot one day. My husband and I still remember we were at the table just having coffee, and I just said, I feel to learn tarot. And he's like, okay. And he goes, whatever, and he was really supportive. And so I found that even though I tried to learn it from books, I was just so bored. I had over 100 books, and they weren't relatable, in my opinion. And then I felt to start learning the cards backwards, and that's what my Back in Time Tarot book was about, was teaching myself tarot by my own memories, things that are happening in the news, fairy tales, books, songs, whatever, and then pairing tarot cards and coming up with my own meanings. And so all those books and stuff I never read and what have you, and so I just kind of went by intuition, and I amalgamated the theology I knew in pop culture and psychology and mythology and what have you. And so here I am. I'm kind of taking a breather because this is the first time I haven't been under contract for a book for years. So I'm just like, yeah, but I got an inkling to start a new one, so I'm starting to outline. So we'll see.
Oh
we'll see.
Gosh.
And I'm entering menopause. Talk about too much information. So, I'm getting more pimples now than I ever got as a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah, and my moods are all over the place. So I'm like, oh, come on, cut me a break. I just got done writing the biggest book of my life. Can I just have a break?
Let me rest. Yeah, the universe doesn't. For those of us who have that calling, we don't really get to rest, do we?
I don't think so. I swear, I got in line, before I incarnated and said, just go ahead and put 3 lives worth of stuff, and I can handle it.
Right.
And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, okay, well, we'll make sure that you're born a Scorpio with an Aries ascendant to get the motor running.
Oh, wow. I'm an Aries rising, too.
Are you really?
Yeah.
What's your sun sign?
Aquarius.
That's my moon.
OMG.
OMG. So you're an Aquarius sun. What's your moon sign?
I can't remember. Right now, I'm in this phase of my life where I'm looking for all the healing in all the places, and I'm so overwhelmed by all of the different modalities that I can't see straight. Have you been through that?
Yes, absolutely, because I started out, even before tarot, as a New Age editor at the second largest women's site online, BellaOnline.com. And I'm also an Amazon.com Hall of Fame reviewer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with over 2,000 reviews to my name. But the reason I started that is because that was back in 2000. I lived in such a rural area that I was getting irritated that at the time the only tarot site online was just trumpeting how wonderful the tarot decks were that they were reviewing or books. And then I'd get them in the mail and they would be nothing like what they say. And I'm like, son of a gun, I'm going to start reviewing because this is ridiculous.
Wow.
Because I live in such a rural area. I didn't even have a good bookstore, let alone a New Age one. So then I just started getting on a roll, and in that process of healing and going from a traditional Christian background to more mystical and New Age, I, too, was just sucking up everything, and I was reading and reviewing stuff. So, it was numerology, astrology, stuff with personality, too. So I studied the Enneagram and all the different
I'm obsessed with the Enneagram right now. Oh, my God.
Don't tell me. You're a 7.
No, but that's everyone's first guess. Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't tell me. Oh, my gosh, you're bubbly. So I'm thinking positive. You're part of the positive triad, but so are you sure you're not a 7?
So I've taken it twice, and neither one came up a 7. The second time it came up that 7 was my secondary.
Well, you can't go by online tests.
Mm-hmm.
The Enneagram is one of those things where you have to really research it, and the Riso Hudson books are very good. And understanding the wings and stress points and reaction points. Because if you're a healthy type of whatever your type is, you could very well type something else. Or if a person is unhealthy, they might be actually testing as a reactionary point. Like I tested when I first started as a 5. That was my highest. And I think my second highest was an 8. But actually I am a 7 with a very strong 8 wing. Some people think I might be an 8 with a 7.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So what do you test at? 2?
3 wing 2.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, well, the bubbly aspect would be, and the feeling, I was like, you got to have a filler in there, and that would be your 2 wing. So, yeah, you could be. I mean, it gets pretty deep. When you start, then you find out there's more than 9 types. Then you have the wings, the stress points, security points. Then they have the subtypes, whether you're self-preservational, sexual, or social. And then the only one I've heard about a counter was the 6s. I mean, I don't know of any other types being counters. I know the 6s are the loyalists, and it's what most people are. It's kind of like God-fearing, country and all that stuff.
Right.
And also the paranoia and suspicion and us versus them. But they're also the sentinel types that want to guard freedoms and fight injustice. Okay, that's a 6, but a counterphobic 6, it's a fear type. So the counterphobic 6 would actually be more reactionary and aggressive and sometimes mimic an 8, an aggressive 8.
Oh.
But an 8 center is anger, but a 6 center is fear. And so the counterphobic 6 is reacting to that fear of imbalance or being dominated or what have you. So I've never heard of a counter type 3, so I have to look into that because it's so fascinating. It's such a rabbit hole. So yes, to answer your question in a very long-winded way.
No, I love it.
I went down different modalities and different roads and everything. And so, I totally understand. And then you get overwhelmed. You're like, okay, wait a minute. I have to focus just on one thing at a time right now.
Right. Seriously, the reason that I wanted to have you on the show, I heard you on, I cannot remember, I think it's the Paranormal Podcast. Is that the name of it?
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you, how did you even hear of me? And I never had a chance.
Yeah.
Yes, podcast with Jim Harold. He's a really nice guy.
Yes. I'm super into ghosts right now too. So I was listening to that. I heard you speak. And then I think you told a little bit of your story on that, or maybe I just looked you up. And I was like, oh my God. So you've got the psychology background, the religious background, and then moving into spirituality. And I feel like that's kind of the intersection of what often we talk about on the show is often the people on the show are coming from a really conservative upbringing somehow. And then there's this awakening that leads to I'm seeing this explosion of fairy dust and stuff that leads us to our more, I guess, authentic spirituality.
Absolutely. It's scarier because a lot of us are forging our own way. And I think that's this book that I feel called to write right now is kind of scary for me because it's going to be basically about Christian paganism. So I'm going to get hate from both sides.
Yeah.
I'm going to be I was actually thinking about writing under a pen name because I've been accused of actually being, quote, too Christian. There's a 3-star review on Amazon of my Naked Tarot saying, and the title is This Ain't the Bible. And there's only a little bit of Christian stuff in there, but it's all in mystical context of how it applies. And there's so many F-bombs. And
I know,
in racy language. But you know what? Even my first book, Back in Time Tarot, people say, oh, she's too Christian. And I'm like, wait a minute. I know that has informed my path, and I do incorporate it just like I incorporate other religions and gods and goddesses and mythologies. And I'm thinking what it is I'm finding and why I think I really need to write this book is so many people have been hurt by Christianity.
Yes.
And they went to paganism, and then they threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
And they've become, and they're very wounded, and they're so reactionary to anything that even smacks of Christianity that they get triggered.
Right.
You even quote one scripture, and it doesn't matter that you're taking the mystical aspect and you have a non-dogmatic, non-legalistic approach. It still triggers them. And I'm thinking, Naked Tarot is over 110,000 words. And I couldn't believe this person focused on a couple of the references that were probably in the spiritual section of the chapter, because I pack a lot in every chapter, but in terms of the interpretation, I do a work section, a romance section, a parenting section, the first tarot book that ever addresses parenting.
Right.
And then I did a spirituality section. And so it probably was, because I'm sitting there flipping through and I'm like trying to look for my own Christian references. And I'm thinking, wait, am I blind to this? I'm like, no. And so I really feel called to this because so many of us have had to forge our own path. We feel called to incorporate other spiritual traditions. We feel drawn to other gods and goddesses. We are deeply concerned about nature, love animals, believe in universal brotherhood, and yet we still love Jesus and think he's the bomb, and he was the ultimate countercultural revolutionary, and that his disciples and his eventual followers, and of course Catholic Church, totally co-opted what he did and made it a religion when he never intended to make a religion. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much wisdom in the New Testament that people would not even be able to see because, as it says in the New Testament, and there I go bringing it up, straining gnats and swallowing camels. And people are choking on the fact that it says Christian or that it's a Bible verse, not allowing the mystical truth to come out and for them to contemplate it. So I think that's what I'm called to do next, and I think it's going to be a little bit difficult and personal, but, you know, it's just one whose time has come. I mean, I was talking to a friend on Facebook chatting about it, and I'm like, oh, what do you think about this title? Because I haven't told anybody about it yet. And she says, you're not going to believe this. I was just watching a YouTube video about a person saying, you know, for her spiritual well-being, she thinks she's going to unplug from social media and things like that. But she did a little highlight and shared a picture of the clip of the comment section where someone said, you know, I thought I was a full-blown pagan, but when I seen some of the cattiness and cruelty and shame going on in some of those groups, then I started to think, well, maybe I'm a lot more Christian than I realize. Because those who were drawn to Christianity and have not forsaken some of the core truths embrace humility, treating others as you want to be treated, the kindness and things like that. And so when they see some of this cutthroat, they get disappointed. Then they're like, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm not a pagan. And so I'm writing this book to show that, yes, you can be both and how it can be done.
Right.
And so we'll see. I haven't seen a book like it.
Yeah.
You know, I have that pioneer archetype, so we'll see what happens. But it feels comfortable to me because I feel like I need to revisit some of these truths myself as I finish, you know, the book and finishing up some healing myself. Uranus is leaving Aries, and Chiron's there, which is the wounded healer. So, you know, a lot of us are wrapping up doing our healing now before it enters Taurus, which is kind of like a practical application then of what we went through when Uranus was in Aries. So, you know, I'm actually been contemplating Chiron, the wounded healer, a lot. And
here I am. How funny.
the manifestations of Chiron, how it goes from the wounded healer to the shaman to the alchemist. Right now I'm kind of at the shamanistic stage, leaving that to the alchemist because I've already identified my wounds. And a lot of them has been healed, but I'm still doing the shamanistic, you know, just tying up those loose ends, making peace with different things that have happened. And then I think that this book may be part of the alchemist part of Chiron, where I take the hurts, the wounds, the feelings of rejection and shame and just feeling like you don't belong in any place in the world. Nobody wants you because you're too much of that or you're too less of this.
Right.
And to hopefully turn that into the base metals into gold and maybe turn some of that hurt into useful information that helps other people in a similar path.
Yeah. Oh my God, you just said so much that I want to respond to. I want to go back to the piece about, you know, the wounds of Christianity, because I think you're dead on with that. And everything you were saying, I was just hearing when anyone is like lashing out against something that they don't understand, it's just all about fear, right? And I feel like you can probably explain it better than me, but, you know, in consciousness, we're kind of at this, I think, tipping point right now where things are bifurcated even more because we're about to kind of shift to another level. And the fear is just so intense. And I like cannot tolerate it right now.
Yeah, it does seem like things are at a tipping point. I mean, I get fascinated by some of the stuff I see on Gaia TV. Do you happen to stream Gaia?
I started a subscription after Jim's podcast, and then I found some of the things were so dumb. I was like, how do I find the good stuff?
Yeah. Well, it's true. You do have to sort.
Yeah.
But like Regina Meredith is really down to earth, and she has some really good, old, deep stuff. There's a lot of good stuff on there. The bad thing about Gaia, I feel, is like when you first sign up, they ask you initially what your interests are so that they can kind of guide you. It doesn't lock you in totally, but then they start recommending a bunch of stuff that's in a certain area, and other things get pushed to the way. So the best thing to do is to go to the interface where you browse according to category, and then that way you can say, okay, there's yoga, there's alternative healing, there's conspiracy if you're into that, but there's also the paranormal into healing and things, and then you can find some of the good stuff. I tend to like a lot of the UFO stuff.
Yeah.
But some of that is totally out there.
Yeah.
But some of the people are talking about, and I don't know if it's true or not, but whether it is true or not, there is a metaphorical, I feel, application where they talk about they feel like there is an ascension going on and could have something to do with the sun sending out one of its mass coronal ejections. And when that happens, people will either fry, so to speak, or they'll evolve.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I can't help but wonder if there's truth in that, because there's a scripture in the New Testament where it says everything that can be shaken will be shaken from within. And it really parallels the Tower card, where when things get shaken and the roof gets blown off, if you don't have a strong foundation, meaning what your values and your authenticity, your true beliefs are, things can get leveled and you feel devastated because you don't really have your North Star. You don't really have your compass intact. And so it does make me wonder if this escalation of fear and violence and hatred and paranoia is basically the rumblings of new consciousness. And it's going to be that if people are clinging to their fear and their old beliefs that are not working for them anymore, and their hatred and whatever, they're just going to get worse into that. Whereas the people who are open to being stripped down and having the, quote, refiner's fire come and burn the wood, hay, and stubble, so to speak, to reveal the gold, silver, precious stones, as in the New Testament says, then they're the ones that are going to be, not that they're better than, it's just they're welcoming the change and saying, you know what, I'm wanting to be free no matter what. Burn these chains off me, I'm ready to go, no matter how painful it is. And so it makes me really wonder if, it just seems like there's big crap happening. And
oh, you can say shit, don't worry.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, thanks. Awesome.
Please say shit. My listeners are like, why are there no F-bombs right now?
Yes, I know. Well, I'm trying to be polite. I wasn't sure. Yeah, there is big shit happening. Exactly. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing. It's basically evolve or die. Not necessarily literally, but...
Right, but... Okay, this is probably a little out there for some people who are listening, but I feel like, so I just turned 40. My parents both died 5 years ago, and I have so many friends whose parents have died. And at my age, that's not normal, right? Like that should be for someone at least 10, 15 years older than me that's happening.
Yeah, usually.
And all of the celebrity deaths that are happening and suicide rates are up. So I do think that there is literally an evolve or die, or... I don't want to say that everyone who's dying is not evolved, but your work is done and this plane, whatever.
No, I totally agree. 2 days ago, I volunteered for a local animal shelter corporation, a rescue. And her brother, who is a year younger than me, 47, was just killed in a car accident. I mean, I just found out about it. Or was it yesterday? I mean, she was just talking about him with me the night before when we were talking about securing a grant for funding for the spay neuter clinic or whatever. And then the next day, he's dead.
Jeez.
And I know people die all the time, but it's just really, really weird. And when I was looking for his obituary, I was commenting to my husband, look at all these young people just in this local funeral home who were young and died. And it had unusual phrasing like died of natural causes. They looked all healthy and they were 32 or whatever, 35.
Jeez.
Or it'll say died in the emergency room. It just seemed weird to me. And like you said, the celebrity deaths and suicides, and it's like, wow. And I think some people, too, though, are just finding the world's too much for them.
Yes.
And it's like, I cannot blame them, honestly. I know this sounds terrible, but I used to think, well, suicides, they're cowards. They're taking the easy way out. But gosh, life is hard. And I cannot blame someone to want the pain to stop,
right?
Especially
right.
if they cannot seem to find relief,
right.
if they're surrounded by negative people who don't have their best interests in heart.
right.
It can be hard to claw your way out. It really can.
Right.
And so it's heartbreaking, especially when you're hearing these young people,
yes,
12, 9, 8, getting bullied, and they're hanging themselves in a closet. And I'm like, oh, those poor things.
I just want to say right now to people listening, one of my biggest passions is making sure that people get connected to a good therapist. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out to me. I can't be your therapist most likely, but I can find somebody who can, because there is good help out there and it's hard to find. But I am very, very passionate about helping people make that connection.
That's wonderful. We need people like you.
Yeah. I remember being that person, being overwhelmed by all the therapists. And before I was a therapist, I didn't know how to look. And I was so exhausted from depression. You don't know.
Right. You could barely get out of bed, let alone figure out where the heck to look to get a good therapist. Who's a good therapist? Because
exactly.
Some people are in this crisis. Going to a Freudian is just not going to help. Where they sit there and they'll analyze you for 10 years. You don't need that.
Right.
And if they look in the phone book and it's like, shit, you don't need to be talking about your dreams. You need, you need something to help you now, some cognitive behavioral therapy or even medication or something that helps you right now to get over the hump until we can get to the real hard work of unraveling what the root cause is.
Right, right.
God bless you.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I tell my clients. I have a client who just asked me, oh, can we go every other week now? And I'm like, no, friend, this is when the work starts. We just got you out of crisis. Now we get to dig in and figure out what got you into crisis in the first place.
Absolutely. People think as soon as they get out of crisis, I don't need therapy anymore. Really, they think, oh, okay, temporary respite, thank you. And I've told people this. I'm like, if you don't address the root, it's going to come back up again. And lo and behold, it does. But, people are stubborn, and they get that temporary relief, and they think it's okay. But no, it's basically like cutting a dandelion at ground level. If you do not take care of the root, it is going to pop back up again. Yeah, the weed's not there. Yeah, you can't see it, and yet it seems like it's okay. But lo and behold, when life crunches you again, and it will, guess what's going to pop up? All the issues, all the wounds, all the hurts, all the fears. It'll come back up.
I really try to, because my personal need for healing in this lifetime is so voracious. Like, I can't heal quickly enough. Like, I'm so impatient with it. And so sometimes I project that onto the people who come to see me. And that's not everybody's goal, even though, I want that to be their goal. And so
I actually understand that.
Yeah. I try to ride this fine line of like invitation for people to want that, but then also like letting them take it in their own time.
Oh my gosh. I am so similar, except for feeling called to provoke people out of their stupor.
Yeah.
I have like a trickster archetype. I have like a cold water in the face type of archetype. Really, it's true. And I piss people off, and sometimes I do it on purpose. Scorpio with how many planets in the 8th house, I totally know what buttons to push. And I do it on purpose. Yeah. But it's almost like the Gurdjieff school, the fourth way, controversial teacher method, where you make somebody uncomfortable. Sometimes it's with like a crude joke or dropping an F-bomb or being funny, but sometimes it's just a harsh truth. And then what I feel that I do then is I crack open the ego enough to where I can slip in some truth. Well, silly me, I thought, being Scorpio that I am, I thought everyone wanted to be stripped down and totally, flagellated and totally skinned alive so that they can be healed and authentic with all the crap scraped away. And so I realized that now, and this is part of my wound and healing, to realize how many people I may have marginalized or wounded indirectly by going a little too far or didn't have the compassion combined with it. And so I think that Naked Tarot is kind of my melding of that, where it's the shock and awe, but also the compassion, encouraging people to hang in there and don't give up, and giving them actual tools and actionable steps to get woke if that's what they want. But and I got the rude awakening to realize just even everybody in the New Age movement or Mind, Body, Spirit is not really interested in awakening, even if that's what they say.
Exactly. Denial.
Because if you're easily offended, you're not in it for the long haul. That's all there is to it. If you're going to get pissy at a little casual remark on Facebook, you ain't in it for awakening.
Well, and that goes back to the ego, right? Because, if the ego can't tolerate being shown a mirror, then, it's going to be hard to evolve.
Oh, yeah, and then the projection starts and the demonization. and the witch hunts, and it can actually escalate when it gets in mob mentality and people start plumbing in the lower chakras of self-preservation, us versus them, tribalism, and they question their own self-esteem, their own worth, and then they have their own shame issues. And then, boom, they just see the mirror, and then they turn around and they're punching the mirror thinking it's the other person when it's really their own issues being triggered. And instead of just taking it and trying to distance yourself, sitting with it and say, is there truth in this, or how can I apply it, or at least evaluate before you dismiss something. And I realized, whoa, I'm really on a path here that's kind of narrow and full of snipers in the bushes and stuff, and it's like, whoa. But my heart has always been to see humanity awaken, to literally see with their eyes open. The Bible, I think it was Jesus is talking about they hear but they don't listen, and it's one thing to have a superficial sensory interface with spiritual truth, but it's a completely another one to allow it to come within you and integrate it and just stew on it, meditate it, digest it, and then let it become a part of your walk. Or if it's not for you, you take the meat, you spit out the bones. But it's an interesting process that you find when you enter the healing field.
Right. Exactly
what that entails and some of the things that happen when healing begins. And it gets messy and ugly sometimes.
A lot of times.
Yeah, it's ugly all the time. What are we saying?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but my 2018 was so painful. And it was just a lot of really deep lesson learning and recognizing patterns, but they had to become so massive that I couldn't ignore them anymore. And it was so fucking painful.
Yeah, 2012 was the year from hell. And then, 2012 to 2016 was pretty dicey. And then 2017 and 2018 is when I really started to heal up those wounds and practice forgiveness and some of the collateral damage that happened in my life trying to be a healer through writing or podcasting or reviewing or what have you. And so actually, no, 2018 was not too bad a year, other than writing Naked Tarot. It was excruciating. So in that way, that was very difficult, writing that book, because I literally pulled everything within me, and I also felt like I was kind of channeling some higher wisdom there, and it was exhausting. That was exhausting, that aspect. But no, fortunately, I feel like I'm more on, like I was saying about, instead of the wounded healer, I'm at the tail end of the shamanistic aspect, to where finally starting to wrap up, because I had recognized the patterns and challenging myself with them and saying, okay, come on, you have to recognize your own part in this.
Yeah.
And forgive yourself for it. Not that your intentions excused it.
Right.
But you know that you weren't out to hurt anyone. And so now, I'm more of a breathing space where I'm integrating, learning, forgiving myself, healing the shame, and kind of moving into a new phase. But yeah, that sucks when you're in that phase where the patterns just asserting themselves and you can't ignore them and you have to address the elephant in the room. And it's, oh gosh, it's a really, really challenging place to be.
Yeah. But out of that, I do feel like this year I'm a fucking phoenix rising from the ashes.
Absolutely. But you got to burn, baby, burn first.
That's right.
You can't. People love the image of the phoenix. It's like, honey, you can love that pretty firebird all you want. Your ass is going to have to sit in that nest and burn. You have to burn, burn, burn. You have to smell the smell of your flesh sizzling. It is not a quick and easy burn, and it's hard, but you cannot be the phoenix until you burn. That's just the way it goes. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just a bird,
Yeah. And I don't like birds, so yeah.
Oh, no. Oh,
I don't.
Yikes.
Anyway, forget about the birds. I feel it's funny. I'm always asking people, are you a healer? What do you think about wounded healer? And you've already answered these questions without me even asking. But I guess to be more pointed about it, tell me about yourself as a healer. What does that mean to you?
Pretty much like what I said before. It's the glass of water in the face. I don't know if you know much about G.I. Joe Jeff and the Fourth Way, and he was actually instrumental in bringing the Enneagram to the forefront. But he was a very controversial figure. He was in Enneagram 8, which is the most aggressive type of the Enneagram, and that's what my wing is. And for those who signed up for his program and said, we want to be your disciple and what have you, he would deliberately push their trigger points and humiliate them in some way.
Wow.
Or, I guess some of it was controversial, but a lot of people got awakened out of it. And actually, when I was in counseling in college, I actually admitted myself into an in-hospital program for major depression because I realized that I could not heal myself after this. I was minoring in counseling, and it helped me. Applying some CBC to an extent helped, but I couldn't get out of it. I needed a wisdom higher than, the place that got me there.
Yep.
And I kind of see my therapist as like that because they were very confrontational. I mean, it was like a 1-month program where they said 1 month in that stew was like 2 years of weekly therapy. And oh my God, was it? And they kicked my ass totally.
Yeah.
And but it was very controversial, very humiliating, but not in the way that people would think. You'd almost have to know what psychodynamics is about and role-playing and things like that to understand what we mean by humiliation. We're not talking about crazy stuff where you're stripping someone and you put a fire hose on them and then, shower them with glitter or anything. It's nothing like that. And so anyway, I see myself as a healer as more like the trickster, where the trickster comes in and consciously interrupts the status quo because they see that people are asleep.
Yeah.
And there's different ways you can do that. There's the funny trickster. There's the court jester, who was the only ones in the medieval courts that could get away with saying things about the king and not get killed, but they could deliver the truth because they were the jester. So then there are some that are more of the serious type tricksters, where they come in and they say truth like a sword, and it cuts to the quick, but it also cuts out the cancer of ignorance. And so I feel I'm an unconventional healer. Not with my family, though, and not with, close friends. I'm actually a good listening ear, and people call me generous and sweet and everything, and that's what's so funny when I see sometimes reactions to me and my work online. It's as if they're describing, 2 or sometimes 3 different people. You got the demonization.
Yeah.
She's a bitch, or she's this or that, and then you see them, she's so sweet and generous, and I'm laughing. I'm like, I'm all that, yes.
Yeah, and we all are.
Yes, we are, and the bitchiness was conscious. Some of the things were actually conscious, on-purpose things, knowing that people may misunderstand, there'll be backlash and what have you, but thinking, it needs shaken up, the status quo. And can things go a little too far? Sometimes, yes. But so I think with this new book, that where I'm going to talk about mystical Christianity and paganism, it's going to be more of a inclusionary, come on, let's all get along, let's see all these wonderful truths together type of a healer. But I feel that sometimes people need shaken and slapped out of their stupor before they can even hear some of the deeper truths. Because otherwise it's just going to bounce off of them. It's just like throwing popcorn at a person. It's just going to bounce off. And it's almost like a person has to be cracked open first to get the truth. Now, that can happen with a tower experience in life where we're devastated by a loss, an illness, a divorce, something unexpected, and then we're forced to confront our beliefs and say, oh my gosh, wait a minute, something's seriously wrong here, and you have to re-examine. I'm the type of healer where I just will go into a group or, through my work, whether it's a blog post or a book, and say, okay, you guys who say that you're into consciousness and awakening, well, here. And then let's pass around the cold glass of the water to put in your face. So in the past, I've been a very unconventional healer. I mean, even if you look at Jesus, the only people he ever criticized were the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were the snotty,
hypocritical
religious leaders who tried to keep people from God, not to mention take their money. And if you hear some of the stuff Jesus says, everybody's like, oh, Jesus meek and mild the dove. And I'm like, no, he kicked ass. I mean, he was overturning the tables in the temple. You money changers, you've made my house a den of thieves.
My temple should be a house of prayer, but you have made it. Yeah, sorry. I love Jesus Christ Superstar. That is my favorite musical of all time.
Amen, sister. Totally, absolutely correct. And he would say things, you guys are whitewashed tombs. He said, you look all pretty on the outside, and then inside you're full of dead man's bones. You'll go to land and sea to make a convert, and then once you do, you make them twice as ton of hell as you. So, there is some precedence for people who are compassionate and loving, who actually go into where the status quo is and those strongholds of self-righteousness and elitism. And I got my shit together-isms. And you come in and say, oh, really? Okay, well, let me do a little bit of stuff and we'll see. And then, boom, towers start falling right and left because somebody dare go up to the house and they poke a little twig in it, and I'll be darned if it wasn't made of straw. And it collapses, and then people cry, and they blame the person with the stick.
Right.
So that's my type of healing.
Yeah.
It's very unconventional.
I'm resonating with it so much because I kind of feel that way too. And the thing that I always bump up against, because, I was raised pretty conservative Christian too, and humility was definitely like my mother's like number one value. And to put yourself out in front of people saying something, especially something that's contradictory, I'm not humble, right? Somehow like I'm saying I'm right and you're wrong. And there's so much wrapped up in that I'm working through right now to figure out like, how can I feel okay putting my message into the world that I think is right? And I know that it resonates with some people, but how do I tolerate the childhood wounding that's not okay, you know?
Yeah, it's not easy. And then when you get the backlash, then you start second guessing your calling yourself. You're like, well, wait a minute, maybe I am just an asshole.
Right, right. Yes. That's my biggest fear. It is.
Right. And I realized that when I put things out there to stir the pot or I confront people with things, I'm not sure, but when I look back, I don't think I was ever so dogmatic to say, I'm right, you're wrong,
right,
or you suck because of this, or anything. It was more like just calling things for what they are. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of like calling the emperor out and saying, geez, he has no clothes. What's wrong with you people?
Right.
You know, you're all fawning about the beautiful lace and the intricate gold embroidery, and nobody except the little child with a big mouth is saying, he has no clothes. And then it's not until the child, in his innocence, he's not indoctrinated enough with fear and shame yet to know that you don't do that. You don't go against the crowd, or you don't go against authority figures, or you don't go against popular opinion or what the tribe says. He's not yet, and I think that's why in that fairy tale it's the child, because he's not yet indoctrinated yet to the fear and shame of that kind of thing with tribes and authorities. And so he just states the obvious. The emperor has no clothes. And so if you look at that on one level, all he's doing is speaking the truth. But if you're looking at it from a perspective of the authorities and how dare you voice an opinion that is contradictory to prevailing belief and what have you, then the person's demonized. And I think it's another reason why the child was chosen in that fairy tale, because it's really hard to demonize a child.
Yeah.
Just innocently pointing it out. Now, if it would have been a woman, she would have been called a witch or a bitch.
Right,
you know?
right.
But because a child does it, he's so naive, but oh my God, he's right, you know? And so I love that fairy tale. And I think that's the kind of healer I am, you know, and I have a very strong magical child, actually. I love watching cartoons. People, even my husband and son, they say, you're so complex, because there's a part of me, you know, I'll sit there and I'll watch Care Bears, I watch, you know, Strawberry Shortcake, I swear to God, I know. You know, Pink Panther or Scooby-Doo, and I'm sitting on Boomerang, or I'll watch some of the kids' shows from when our son was little, and I'm like, hey, you want to watch a Thomas Tank Engine? You know? and my husband just walks in and goes, oh, my God. And he just walks like, and he laughs, but, you know, it's that magical child archetype that I think keeps me youthful and positive and joyful. I mean, it used to be the wounded child, but now she's a magical child. Who was it that said, it was one of the transcendentalists who was accused, I don't know if it was Emerson, who was accused of being contradictory. And he says, am I contradictory? So be it. You know, I'm made of multitudes. And I love that book. Have you ever read Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Myss?
No.
Oh, my gosh. You totally...
Okay, putting it in my queue. Sacred Contracts
by Carolyn Myss changed my life. And she talks about how she feels that we were all born with 12 main archetypes. And 4 of those are common to all, which is the child, the prostitute, the saboteur, and the victim. Things that we all go through, all of those levels. And then we have 8 other ones that are unique to us that make us up to help us fulfill our soul contract here on earth. And so when you have contradictory ones, like I have a strong judge, I have a magical child, I have the detective, and yet I have a hedonist. And at any point, we're kind of like this diamond with different facets, and then somebody's used to just seeing 1 or 2 facets, you know, they get thrown for a loop when they see the other ones, and then they act like that you're being inauthentic, or you're not who you say you are, or and it's like, no, I am all that, and it's okay. Yeah. So many people want to peg you, or we feel we have to be pegged into just 1 or 2 archetypal patterns, and I think that's why a lot of people are fearful and repressed. Is that, you know, they have these other urges, but they push them down because it's, quote, wrong. Like, okay, I can't be a judge archetype because I was taught not to judge.
Right.
You know, not to be critical. Or I can't be a detective because I'm told not to be nosy and mind my own business. Or I can't let the child archetype come out and play because I've read all of John Bradshaw's book and I know that, and they get it wrong. They confuse childishness with childlikeness. There's a difference. You know, childlikeness is when you're not maturing and you're not taking responsibility, but childlikeness is when you take those traits of wonderment and beauty and curiosity and, wow, every day's a new experience. There's a difference. And I think people need to realize that they contain multitudes, and they have to explore what they are and let them out. Because if they don't, they can implode in an existential depression, which is totally different than a psychological depression.
Yes.
And the only way that you cure an existential depression is to find out who you really are and allow those patterns to come out so you can live a holistic, well-rounded, integrated life.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. Well, we're coming to the end of the hour, and I want to make sure to respect your time, but for people who are really digging this conversation, obviously they can read your books. It sounds like you write blogs. Like, how else can people get in touch with you and utilize your services?
Well, as far as time, you can talk to me as long as you want. I love talking to people like you. I don't have enough people pulling on me to get this stuff out of me. So if you want to talk longer, I'm totally with that. I'm serious. JanetBoyer.com is my main website. I don't blog like I used to. I'm actually even thinking of pulling back more from social media because it's just starting to really get to be a photoshopped who can have the prettiest life type of thing. And now I myself don't participate in that, but I get so tired of the polished presentations and lack of authenticity. There's no traction. It's like I can't find things to relate to, and so I have a strong hermit archetype as well. And so I have to pull back from humanity. I really think I was a nun in a past life, to be honest, because I have that urge to pull back and contemplate. And I don't blog much anymore, but if you go to janetboyer.com, you can find lots of reviews and find out things I'm into. I do tarot readings. I write books. Also, I've been making some sacred inspired jewelry too. So I have an Etsy store where we sell my husband's original art. My son loves to sew. He wants to be a male fashion designer. He makes the coolest tarot bags you ever saw. Tarot bags for he makes tarot bags.
Holy shit.
Yep, oracle decks for runes and everything. You have to see some of the gorgeous stuff he does. And so I've been actually focusing on the Etsy store. It's almost like since I've been so in the intellectual realm with writing and promoting Naked Tarot, which came out last fall, that now I'm enjoying. I started making mostly bracelets, but I do earrings, necklaces, and they're almost like a meditation. I had a friend of mine on Facebook. She says, it's almost like your jewelry is little prayers. And I said, oh, that is so sweet of you to notice that. And I said, because it is. I mean, I have tons of beads and things and charms, and I just look at them, and I just feel inspired. A theme comes to me or what have you, and like empowerment or whatever, and then I collect them and I make them on memory wire so it fits almost any wrist. And so I'm actually into jewelry making and beauty. The Hedonist is coming out now, too, with cooking for my family, finding new recipes. People have been telling me to write a cookbook. I'm like, I don't know, maybe.
Wow.
So I'm really enjoying the earth realm because that actually is my least represented not only in my astrological chart, but just energetically. I tend to be very airy and fiery, and so now I'm more watery with intuition and earthy. I'm getting more grounded with meditation, more being in nature, the senses, the five senses, because in Jungian terms with the Myers-Briggs and Keirsey, I'm an ENFP. So my weakest is sensing, totally not observant when it comes to the natural realm. I'm looking in the spirit, Like my husband's like, didn't you notice this, this, this? And he's looking at the physical, and I'm saying, no, but I noticed this, this, and this.
Right.
I'm looking in the spirit realm. So I'm focusing more on getting grounded and doing pretty jewelry and things like that. But if they go to janetboyer.com, they'll find all my social media connections, any of the blogs I do, my tarot readings page, the Etsy store. They'll find a link to all my books and ebooks. I have over a dozen ebooks as well as 5 actual books. And yeah. Take
a breath, right?
I am now. That's actually what I've been doing for the last 2 or 3 months, and it's been really weird. And I said to my husband, what kind of phase is this? It's so weird. I have no map.
Yeah.
I don't have a contract for a book. I'm entering menopause, so that's totally different. And there's this what next aspect, and I knew it was something different because I've been immersed in tarot for, oh my gosh, over 10 years now, 12 years. And usually, and my husband noticed this, I go through 10-year cycles. I intensely study personality systems for 10 years, then it was tarot for 10 or 12, and now I'm entering something else. It's like, okay, what now? It's like, what just happened? It's like I had a tornado blow through my life, and I did a lot of things, and then it rebuilt the town, and now I'm like, okay, now.
Now just enjoy the town? What?
Yeah, it's you mean I could just go in and look around? All right. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate you spending your time with me today. This was awesome. It was really inspiring.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope I didn't talk too much. We didn't even get to talk about the book much, so I hope I didn't ramble so much that I ended up co-opting some of your questions.
No, like we said before we started, this is always very organic, and I don't really have a plan. And so I just always trust that whatever's supposed to happen in an interview happens, and that there's somebody out there who's going to listen, who's going to get what they needed. So that's how I roll.
That's me too.
OMG.
I was just going to say, for your editor's sake, oh my God, I love you.
And Andrea's like rolling her eyes again. Okay, fine. Sarah has a new best friend. But seriously, yeah, this has been really, really great. I'm really glad to know you.
It's so nice to talk to you because other than my husband and son, it's not very often you get around a like-minded person where you could just literally talk for hours. It's like a tangent here, a tangent there. Yeah, and that reminds me of this. And you could just keep on talking and sharing the wisdom and talking about what you're learning and what you've been through. And it's just so refreshing and exciting because I do have that hermit archetype, and I'm very secluded and isolated in some respects. To talk to a like-minded person, and it's like it just lights me up. It's like, ooh, ding, 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 ding. You know, it's like a pinball machine, and the balls are like just hitting and lighting things up. And it's a great feeling to come across a like-minded person like you.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much, Janet, for taking the time to be with us today. For more information on Janet and all of the happenings, you can visit us at www.headhearttherapy.com/podcast. And thanks as always to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art photo, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, bye-bye.